Hey everyone. So we are moving into mini lecture number 3 in week 2 of Geography 4880. We left off here. We just reviewed the 4 different main threads of regional geography as they existed in the 1930s, 40s, 50s. Okay, we saw how regional geography really did try to constitute itself as the main core of geography at this time, with an emphasis on the concept of regions, okay? And yes, different threads of regional geography tried to define the region in different ways, whether some emphasized watersheds or, economic planning units or livelihoods or whatever. They each took their own different, weighted different factors differently in how they define regions. But nonetheless, they all all agreed that we could define regions with clear boundaries and that focus should be on describing those regions and how they differ as unique entities from other places around the world. And to some extent, that extended after 1950 in the form of world geography. Okay, so world geography really followed the Saurian Carl Sauer's interest in reading the rural landscape. Okay, looking at different components of the world around us and reading how it reflects cultural expressions, okay, whether that's through architectural styles or barn styles or whatever. Indeed, world geography retained the tendencies of a descriptive regional science, comparing spaces, drawing conclusions about cultural difference and impact on the environment, with an emphasis on agriculture, land use, population dynamics. What we see here is Dr. John Fraser Hart, former president of the American Association of Geographers, 97 years old and still going. So very much, a part of this period of world geography after the 1950s. And, someone who, as we'll see, took into account some of the limitations of regions in moving forward rural and regional geography after 1950. Indeed, some of those limitations, your textbook notes. So what were they? To the concept of region and to regional geography as a subfield. Well, one of the key limitations is, do regions actually even exist in the world? Are they just waiting to be found and discovered by geographers, or are they what we would call social constructions? That is, lines on the map that we as society, we as individuals create to help us organize our thinking about the world, okay? This is, a really great illustration of the fact that regions are slippery, as your textbook puts it, is, some of these quizzes that are popular in the States, haven't seen them so much for Canada, but, if you think about what is the US Midwest, well, Americans don't even really know what the US Midwest is. US Midwesterners don't even really know what the US Midwest is. They have different definitions of what that region is and who is included in it, okay, as we can see from this map here. And so that's a problem with the concept of region. Okay, regions are supposed to describe coherent, consistent entities that are different from one another. Well, that's not so clear when we can't even actually draw those lines around those entities. So they may not be as essential as we really have thought. Okay, instead they might be actually constructed by economic processes, by political processes, as opposed to real, hard and fast, pre-existing essential entities in the world. Another question that was levied at regional geography, well, are regions actually homogeneous? Okay, the idea that regional geographers had was that we can say, there are parts of the world that are share, this particular area, let's say, Southern Ontario, has, particular tendencies, is relatively homogeneous, thus it is a region, okay? It tends to, have, be English speaking, have a particular architectural style, have a particular economic focus on agricultural and light industry, we can call it a region because it, kind of has that homogeneous, that shared definition, a coherent set of factors in it. In reality, there's lots of things that go against that, okay? In any region, there's always some sort of, there's always differences that pop up within those regions, okay? So clearly, not all of Southern Ontario is English speaking. There's lots of different economic activity that happens here, other than what we typically think of as Southern Ontario economic activity, like light industry and agriculture. Okay, there's all sorts of differences that mean maybe our definition of this region isn't so clear cut. Okay, maybe it actually shares a lot in common with very different parts of the world, very distant away. And indeed, geographers made that critique. They said, well, actually, regions are not essential pre-existing entities, but they're actually formed relationally. That is to say that regions might exist, they come to be, but only through, in competition with, in contrast with, in connections with other regions, okay? So, in many ways, it might be that Southern Ontario's connections with the world, be they political, economic, cultural, social, through immigration, through trade, so on, are actually what make it a region, rather than just sort of pre-exist naturally due to topography and patterns of settlement or whatever. And indeed, one of the biggest critiques that was levied at regional geography was that, do we really just need descriptions of different places? Okay, as we'll see, geographers after the 1950s really took aim at regional geography and its focus on describing different parts of the world. Instead, geographers turned their attention to explanation and prediction. We'll get into that more in just a second. Indeed, the location and arrangement of phenomenon is not just something that can be described, read from the landscape, as Carl Sauer might have it, but it also has explanatory potential. That is, it could help us predict, relationships underlying human behavior, mechanisms of driving landscape change. Okay, and this is what geographers in the 1950s really started to focus in on, as opposed to describing the world. Okay, instead they wanted to explain using measures of spatial distribution such as density, concentration, and pattern. They didn't want to just sort of describe how that matched, cultural diffusions and so on. They actually wanted to use that to explain how cities developed over time in very general ways, as well as to predict how, for instance, cities might expand over time. So just as a background here, we could read this landscape or these landscapes here in terms of cultural diffusion aspects and architectural styles or whatever, but we can also look at them in terms of density. We look at the left here and we have two different forms of density. A at the top is less dense than B at the bottom. We have concentration. So B there is more concentrated than A at the top. Same density, just more concentration. And on the right, we have pattern. So there's a clearly different pattern, more organized, regular pattern in A, and a less, just a different pattern for B. And so this focus on measurement of those different things, density, concentration, pattern, is really what defines human geography in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. Human geographers sought to carve out a disciplinary niche within sciences, the sciences as a whole, with the concept of space. They wanted to develop general theories about space to not only describe where things happen, but why they happen and what will happen in the future based on their theories. Okay, and so this is how we get spatial science. We'll see in the next few lectures how this led to the development of economic and urban geography at this time, but ultimately it came to inform geomatics and GIS, okay? So we'll actually pause there with our review of the limitations of regional geographies and how that came to set up the stage for economic and urban geography in the 1950s, with our emphasis on measuring patterns of density, concentration, pattern, in order to explain processes and ultimately make predictions. We'll pick that up in the next mini lecture.